Welcome to Noon Hour Slides from the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery. We're located on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot, Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We pay our respects to First Nations and Métis ancestors and reaffirm our relationship with one another. We gratefully acknowledge funding from the City of Moose Jaw, Sask Arts, Sask Culture, Saskatchewan Lotteries, Canada Council for the Arts, Canadian Heritage, and the Government of Canada. I'm Vincent Hotelling, the administrative assistant here, and I'm here to welcome you to today's presentation. Karla and Chris Rasmussen are here to talk about San Francisco. Welcome.
Hello, everyone, and those joining us online. I'm Chris, and this is Karla.
Here as well.
And so we are talking about our trip to San Francisco that we decided to take over the Christmas and New Year's break this year. We don't have a lot of family around us, and so we decide to travel during the holidays, which often gets us some better deals and some more interesting experiences. And we'll talk about some of those here today. So we flew out Christmas morning, December 2022, and for those that remember the news, this was the Christmas tour when all air travel across Canada completely fell on its face. And so we had several issues, but being a calmer person that I am when it deals with the public sector, we were able to get flight changes a lot quicker than the people who were shouting and screaming and causing a giant fuss. So we were supposed to we flew into Calgary through a snowstorm to get to Regina to be able to get to our flight in Calgary. And then they wanted us to be in LA for 18 hours sitting in the lobby of LA. They weren't going to offer us anything else. And we said that was unacceptable. We'd rather have you cancel our trip altogether than be stuck in LA for an entire day in the airport. And so we finally made it into San Francisco. The problem being, though, our luggage did not. And so most of our stuff we traveled in carry-ons, which was just fine for us, but we did have some winter clothing in our check bags. So we were able to make it through okay, I would suggest.
I just want to point out, this was our first time in LA, and it is a very big airport. In the upper right corner, you'll see kind of a space age building there. That's the original terminal, and it's really cool. The modern terminal is kind of built around it, but it's a historic site now, and they use it for some administration. So while we were there, we did a little bit of exploring in the airport. We got to meet the therapy dogs that they had. There's two of the spaniels in the pictures there. So that was nice and helped to make us relax just a little bit more. So after traveling, we checked into our hotel after looking at the airport between several different counters for any sign of our luggage. We checked in at 2:14 a.m., which is 3:14 a.m. Saskatchewan time. So we had been up almost 24 hours because our flight originally was supposed to leave quite early from Regina. So we were exhausted and we went to sleep.
So in San Francisco, we like to stay at the San Remo, which is down in North Beach. And so the San Remo is, if I'm not mistaken, a boarding house for like years and years and years. It's right by the wharf, so it's a rather nice place. Up on the roof, however, they have taken what would have been likely a shed or something for the roof, and they've turned it into this absolutely gorgeous little suite that you can rent up on the roof. And so, being that it was Christmas, we decided to splurge a little bit and share Christmas with each other, and that was our gift, was being able to stay in that little suite
Penthouse, yes.
in the penthouse. And so you got to see most of North Beach from the roof, which was absolutely phenomenal.
So that's the view from our stairwell going up. We were the only ones on the roof. And then the middle picture is the view that would be to our west, I think. And then one of the streets nearby. It was kind of strange to see autumn leaves on the sidewalk when we were there on Christmas Day and Boxing Day. So a bit of a juxtaposition of feelings there with the seasons.
So as we said, we were right down by the wharf, and so our first day of adventuring began by checking out the wharf right out our front door. And the Jeremiah O'Brien is one of the ships that's down in the wharf area, and so you can go and take a peek if you want. We try and walk as much as we can when we travel, because if you slow down a little bit, you often get to see more. And so that's where we started out our tour.
I will also add I had an excruciating headache. I was quite dehydrated. It was warm in all of the airports we were in. I think it was 27 degrees at LA and we had to walk outside, so I was roasting. Many of the water fill stations were broken or not in use in the airports, and I didn't feel like paying $6 to $7 for a small bottle of water. So I did that to myself to a certain degree, but I was dragging quite slowly here because my head was about 5 sizes too big, but it was good.
These are just some of the lovely scenery down by the wharf. And then we went to the museum that's down on the wharf. And this, if I'm not mistaken, is a national park museum. And so you can go and check out old houseboats that would have been used in the bay. There's some old fishing boats down there. There's tugboats down there. There's 1 or 2 tall ships down there. It's a really interesting place to check into. And we just happened to upon it on a free day. So we didn't have to pay admission, which was lovely as well. We would highly recommend, if you're going to any of the major cities around the world, check on free days. Most of the major cities will have free museum days. We found it in Poland, we found it in San Francisco, we found it in New York for an upcoming trip that we're going to there. So don't hesitate to look out and just type in the city and go free museum day. And there will often be a schedule that pops up and you can find tremendous things for free to go and see and do. We were lucky enough to go and see Lady with Ermine in Poland for free. And so that saved us a pile of money on admission and will again when we go to New York here.
See some of the big hills as we go up away from the water there. The High Street Pier is also a historic site as part of this Maritime Museum. I think one of the other reasons it was free this particular day was they were having a bit of a tidal surge and they were trying to limit the number of people in the area so they could kind of monitor who was going in and out.
So as we mentioned, we went for Christmas and we showed up on where our first full day of touring would have been on Boxing Day. So right in the midst of the Jewish ceremonies. And so they were doing outdoor events at Union Square and at many of those major parks down in that area, they were doing something to celebrate the holiday season. So we showed up just as they were lighting one of the final flames on the menorah, a great big natural gas menorah. It was really neat. And then Macy's and all of the different stores down in that Union Square area, kind of those higher end shopping centers that are there, had some phenomenal decorations going on. So there is Louis Vuitton, which of course we can't afford, but it doesn't cost anything to look.
I particularly enjoyed looking at all the haute couture. It's a little bit on the strange side in some of the window displays, but definitely fascinating. And the first time I'd seen anything of that caliber up close like that. These pictures here are from the City of Paris Rotunda, which is now part of one of the largest Neiman Marcus's in America. And it was part of an old building, I think it might have had that. Originally it was built and was opened in the late 1800s. It has its roots in the gold rush actually, and it was a department store, changed hands a little bit, but the main store was demolished in 1980 after they were trying to preserve it. And Neiman Marcus says, we will keep this original rotunda. So you can see there's a glorious large stained glass sort of dome, and then they hang these lights as a Christmas tree over the holiday season. So we spent a lot of time just looking at that from various perspectives. You know, the tall picture there is from the street. We're right underneath of it. We actually went to a balcony to walk around part of it. So it was pretty phenomenal.
And I was able to convince some of the staff members to let me behind the counter at the end of the day, because that's where the center is, the top right photo, is over their checkout area. So it was behind the tills and it was the end of the day. So I sweet talked one of the nice young ladies to let me go behind the till and take a photo from the dead center of it. It's quite impressive. And so, of course, as you can imagine, the city is still lit up for Christmas, and we just took in as much as we could. The nighttime was phenomenal to get around because of all the different decorations that you could see.
And of course, we took the cable cars.
Wow, and who doesn't?
So this is getting back home that evening. We had a nice full day. My headache had finally diminished. The other thing I'll talk about maybe in a little bit, you can see one of the old streetcars there in the top right corner. And then just some other nice views. The one in the center is from our balcony again, and that's Quake Tower up on the hill. We didn't make it any closer on this trip, but we had visited San Francisco in 2019 and had a more thorough visit at that time. So it was still nice to see it there.
Finally, 2 days later, our luggage shows up. Apparently, according to the tracking number, it never left Calgary. It was stuck in Calgary for 3 days and they had lost it despite confirming that it had left Calgary. So They had no bloody idea where anything was that day, but we'll give them a bit of a pass on that, because when we got into San Francisco, they had an entire carousel area at their airport filled with lost luggage, and they had it roped off and guards around it.
And you were escorted to go up and look for your missing luggage.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of luggage. Some of them had been there for days already. And the one gentleman that I was talking to figured they'd be there for days more, because some of them were from Christmas ski trips. So there were skis and snowboards and boot bags just everywhere. I have no idea how they would have made it through all of that stuff. Some of these other photos that we're going to go through is down on the pier, Pier 39, which is the major tourist area down on the wharf. And so they had the seals was an art project where different people could design them, and they were shown all over the place with the different designs. One was for Christmas. Some of them are painted.
This is also where the seals actually gather quite on a regular basis. You might remember the 1989 earthquake, the water kind of drained out of the bay to a certain degree. The sea lions have come back and made that their home ever since that happened. So it is very much a local landmark that way. So they celebrate the sea lions.
So being from the prairies, we don't get a lot of fresh seafood that much. So when we travel, we tend to gravitate towards seafood quite a bit. And so we went to the Crab Shack or the Crab House? Crab House. And so we had the Asian garlic crab, we had a tomato bisque bowl, and sourdough bread along with calamari, I believe. So it was a phenomenal meal to have, you know, the fresh seafood like that. It's not something we get very much, so we tend to go overboard with it. And then, of course, we went to the aquarium right after having seafood. So
sorry.
Sorry, not sorry. The aquarium there, aquarium at the bay in the harbor, just an absolutely phenomenal facility. Modern, up to date. They, at least from our perspective, really cared about how the animals were living. They were upgrading many of the exhibits, many of the enclosures that were there. It was a lot of fun.
I'm afraid of jellyfish, but I don't mind looking at them when they're in a nice little aquarium like that. And I got to touch a sea anemone. We had a touch pool, so you see those sometimes at aquariums. And I've touched manta rays before. This was the first time an anemone, so that was neat.
Then, of course, how do you go to San Francisco without going to Ghirardelli Chocolates? That's the major chocolate factory that's down there, right on the wharf. And so it's someplace. It's a place we go every time that we're down there.
We also made a visit to the Cartoon Art Museum. So they had a couple of different exhibits. Some were very contemporary with recently published books, up and coming artists and that sort of thing. But for me, the main draw was this little exhibit here. They had one wall of Edward Gorey art, originals. And so if you're not familiar with Edward Gorey, he did a lot of, I want to say macabre, but they're kind of a darker subject matter. Growing up, I remember watching the beginning of Mystery on PBS and watching the animations. He was the artist that did those. So that was really cool.
I'm a huge comic book person, always have been, always will be. And so this happened to have a lot of comic book art in it as well. And cells from different TV shows that would have come from comic books. So there was a cell from Inspector Gadget. There was a cell from Fantasia, the Smurfs, a lot of different items. And then there were some cartoon collectibles as well. And so they had a bat cave set up in the one section as a temporary exhibit. And they had some different pieces from some cosplay artists in the area who had put together some different displays on what their take on the costumes would be. So they would be handmade Batman costumes that they had. Right
next door was this really neat shop. We hadn't planned on going there, but we couldn't not go. It was called Real Old Paper. And so this gentleman, young man, was in the business of selling collectible posters, pieces of paper that had movie things on it, advertisements. Some were very San Francisco centric, like you'll see one for the Sutro Baths there. I like the Alfred Hitchcock ones. It was too bad they didn't have one for Vertigo, which of course takes place in San Francisco, but they did have Psycho and a few other really neat ones from Europe as well. So that was fascinating. Some of them were very large scale, probably would touch the ceiling here if you brought them down. And then they had a few different people that wore their white gloves and they would flip through the different movie posters that they had for purchase. So some of them were quite reasonable. And if you were a collector, this would be the place to go.
And even if you're not a collector, if you've got your favorite musical or something like that, they had musical posters from Broadway or from San Francisco, of course, that you could collect, and they were very attainable. I looked at several and had to do up the button on my pocket so that my wallet didn't come out, because they were that close to being attainable for an average person. But how the heck would I get a 6x5 poster home on a plane without ruining it? So I talked to the gentleman a little bit, and he does do shipping and things like that. So maybe the next time we're down there, there might be one that comes home with me.
So we'd come home for a little bit of a break to our suite. So the sun was going down. It was a clear day. We were fortunate to find that there's a Trader Joe's just down the street from us, and they have very reasonably priced wine. So we bought a few different varieties, and we had at least one bottle every day to celebrate this trip, and it was quite lovely. After that, we were hungry, so we went for a bit of a walk. You can see it got darker there. We walked past Washington Square Park and St. Peter's and Paul's Cathedral, and we came into the heart of Little Italy.
This is an absolutely phenomenal area that we kind of gravitate to, one, because it's in the area, but two, because of the atmosphere. When you go up and down the streets, you can see in the photo the lights that are strung across the streets. It really creates a lovely atmosphere, and they have them on all the time. And so we found a little place that had some live music going on, and so we decided to sit outside, and they turned on the fire table for us, and there were heaters. It was just a lovely night to have a charcuterie board, some meatballs, and some wine, and you had a beer, I think. And so a lovely selection of different things. So don't be afraid to wander around in the neighborhoods. You'll be surprised by what you find sometimes.
And you'll see us wearing coats and hats. It was not very cold. I think the coolest was maybe 14 degrees, but it was damp, and we knew that going into the trip. San Francisco is known for its fog and damp conditions. At that time, it wasn't their main foggy season, but we were prepared for that just in case. So it was fairly nice though to walk around. Just some different street art in that picture there. So.
No, I lost myself already.
That's okay. So this is near our suite, and we're getting ready to hop on a bus. And we are going to go over to Golden Gate Park. So on the way, we took the scenic route. It was not direct to Golden Gate Park, but we do go along the bay, and we go past the Presidio, which is an old military base. It's still active in some regards. Some of the buildings are now historic sites, museums, and have been repurposed, but you can see the Golden Gate Bridge there, kind of through the fog. And then we ended up in Golden Gate Park, which again, we had explored fairly well in our trip in 2019. But we came with purpose this time because we wanted to visit the DeYoung Museum. So this is the DeYoung. The top right corner is probably the best picture of it there. There's been a DeYoung Museum in San Francisco, and it originally was opened in the late 1890s. Over time, the various buildings were damaged by earthquakes, fires, things like that. So the current building that you see there now is very modern. It was opened in 2005. There's an observation deck up at the very top, so that's where we're kind of looking from up there. And it's a 360-degree view of the city, and you can see the hills rolling off. You can see downtown in the distance. The bottom right corner there is a map of the heart of San Francisco, and if you look kind of closely, there's a large green rectangle towards the left in that map. That's the park there. So it's actually larger than Central Park in New York City.
Lovely different exhibits. The one in the top, or pardon me, the one on the left right now was an exhibit using wire and shadows. There were some different political statement pieces as well. So to talk about the fortune cookie that everybody thinks is very Asian, it isn't, it's American. And so they use that kind of juxtaposition in some of the art to talk about resident aliens and things like that. It's a very lovely museum. Book more time than you would ever expect. At least double it, if not probably triple the time that you think that you're going to spend going to the DeYoung. You just get lost, and that's the best part of it, is getting lost in the museum, because there's so many amazing things to find if you just slow down a little bit. For us though, one of the incredible highlights of San Francisco was getting to see this exhibit, the Ramses the Great exhibit. This was an add-on piece to the normal admission, but we first walked up and were told that it was sold out. And we were crestfallen, and I was a little choked, because that was why we had gotten up to go there so early. And so we waited around for a little bit, and we're like, oh, well, we'll just go do the regular museum. So we go to pay our admission. And I just happened to say, as I often do, as I'm talking to people, while we're there, and we're like, we're just disappointed we can't get to the Ramses exhibit. Clickety-clack on the keyboard, she goes, well, actually, if you go right now, there's 2 spots open. Somebody didn't show, because at that time, in the aftermath of COVID, they were still doing book times. Somebody hadn't checked in yet, it was past check-in time, and she says, if you can get downstairs to the start of the exhibit right now, you're in. And so it was our lucky day. We are very, very lucky when we travel. This happens to us more often than it doesn't when it comes to our travels. We get lucky and are so very grateful for it, because this is an exhibit that will probably last with me forever. It was just incredible.
I think it would be our first time seeing actual antiquities. We've been in a number of museums and galleries, of course, but to see anything this old, this was our first time seeing and experiencing this. So. Presentation was amazing. It was just the right size, that it wasn't overwhelming, and you had enough space to move around with the group that was in your time slot and get up close and see the details. Many, of course, things from behind glass. Beautiful large sarcophagus there. And you could probably spend all day just in this exhibit alone.
The theme of the presentation was, of course, Ramses was obsessed with gold. And so the presentation, or a lot of the artifacts, were about what was done with gold, what was done with jewelry, how gold was used in maybe unconventional ways. And so to see some of these pieces and the artistry and imagination that went into them, but not only how they would have created them in a time when many don't think they had the technology to be able to do this. You just stare at it in absolute wonder how they transformed gold and other materials into these exquisite pieces. Another big piece of the exhibit was mummies and mummification, of course, because we're absolutely obsessed with mummies and trying to find our way to the afterlife. And the displays they had, it was quite common for up and coming mummy artists. I can't remember the term for them, but they would practice on animals as still a way of sacrifice and to pay homage to the gods, but it was a way to perfect their mummification skills. And so they had quite an intense display of mummified animals, crocodiles, birds, mammals, cats, of course, cats, but it was incredible just to go through and the intricacy in how they were wrapped and how they were preserved. But that, of course, leads itself to the process. This was a stunning piece that was all by itself against a black wall right at the end. And of course, this is Ramses. So I can't overstate how incredible the exhibit was. It was very well done. It was laid out perfectly. You weren't too close to each other, and yet you could still get a feel for how incredible these pieces were.
Then we moved upstairs again, and the DeYoung Museum has quite a collection from the Americas. So this is Central and South America. And there was just so many things to take pictures of. There was a large part of the gallery space dedicated to the Pacific Northwest. And so we saw a number of pieces that had come from Canada originally. There's a few slides with them here. There was also a small Pan-Asian collection too, so some masks and pieces from that area in the world. And then what the DeYoung is probably best known for is the actual paintings. So these are some more contemporary ones. The one of Jackie, Andy Warhol, the top right corner is Georgia O'Keeffe, and I'm a big fan of her work, but there's also a number of different portraiture styles and going through things. So also some fine art from further back. Got some Frank Lloyd Wright, Stickley, a few different famous American artists here, and some more pop culture.
I'm not really drawn to any one particular style, but I know what I like, and that's what it is. I couldn't tell you what it is I like, but there's some different pieces that I like. The one on the left is quite interesting. This next piece here is probably my favorite piece from the entire gallery. And so this piece here is made from decommissioned firearms. And so it was a statement on how firearms can shape our culture and can take lives or give lives. And so it's quite interesting to see a church made out of old pieces of firearms. It's a very face-on conversation about firearms and even the church itself. So it was that on the top left, if I'm not mistaken, was a human spine that was inside the church. So to even bring in some more of the macabre to the conversation, but this piece was huge. I believe, so the people in the background don't give you the proper idea of how big it is. It's not that big. It was about 4 feet high. They're just way off in the background. So just an incredible piece.
So I have to stop at the gift shop, of course. I did not buy this little fog snow globe, but affectionately, the fog in San Francisco is called Carl, has its own Twitter account. I'm Karla with a K, so I do feel some kinship with this Carl the fog. So I posted a picture there, and then we bundled back up and we headed out again, and we walked, didn't we?
Yep.
From that point on. So then we came to the famous Painted Ladies, which are on one side of Alamo Square. For Full House fans, that's where the family lived. The Mrs. Doubtfire house is in the neighborhood. We weren't quite able to walk there that day, but some of the beautiful Victorian architecture at the time. And then we got this.
Then we popped over to Japantown, which was a very eye-opening experience because it is, from everything that we've read, very similar to the culture of Japan. They've tried to create their own little pocket in San Francisco, and it was so much fun to go through the area. There are 3 malls linked together with a central hub that then goes up the street for where all the restaurants are. So there's mall, and then all of the restaurants are up the street. So it's like this T, upside down T. And the food, you could have almost anything you wanted: sushi, noodles, rice. They had the different dumplings. It was quite difficult to pick where we wanted to go. So we ended up using how open was the restaurant so we could sit down right away, because we had places to be that evening. So we ended up having bento boxes and a pho, right? Yeah. And this was one of the pagodas that's in the main square.
That's the Peace Pagoda, and it was made in the 1960s and was a gift to San Francisco from its sister city, Osaka, Japan, and was given to the city in March of 1968. And interestingly enough, I had to look this up because I kind of remember reading something, but I wanted to get it right. San Francisco's Japantown is one of 3 remaining Japantowns in the United States. And it was first settled around the 1860s, and since then, many generations of Japanese people have lived there and helped to keep their culture alive.
When you go to the malls, don't be surprised if you have to wait to go in, because the shops are so small and they have so much stuff in them because they're trying to use the floor space as best they can. So there was quite often only 3 or 4 people in the shop at a time, and then there'd be a queue outside. So we didn't go into a lot of the shops because, as I mentioned, we had places to be, but it was still very lovely to be able to walk around and see the different places that we could.
And with it being the school break too, over the Christmas holidays, there are a lot of students in the area too, so it was very great.
Yeah.
This is a pedestrian road that kind of goes up the middle, as Chris mentioned, so again, they've kind of made it cobblestone, they've added a few different architectural features and that sort of thing, so a very pretty place.
It was so good. Some of the best noodles I've ever had, easily, hands down. And the soup, just delicious.
So we had a place to be, as Chris said, and we hopped on this bus here and went downtown to the Civic Center area. So the concert hall is in this neighborhood. There's a few other performing arts buildings, and then they have this large promenade with the Christmas tree at the end of it. They got it lit up and for the Christmas holidays with traditional red and green.
It was stunning.
Yeah.
They put a lot of work into it, and you could see their efforts to decorate this area. And I'm not a fan of Christmas. I celebrate Christmas, but it's not my favorite. But the lights down there, it was hard to not appreciate the incredible work that went into them. But this is why we went down there.
Main attraction. It's like, throw it over to Karla. So I was a child of the 70s, and I grew up roller skating on my quad skates, and I still love roller skating to this day. I played roller derby for a few years. So we came specifically to this part of the city to take part in San Francisco, and it is an outdoor roller skating experience. One of the driving forces behind this was to get people back to this downtown core. Like many other large cities, San Francisco does see problems with crime and poverty, drug use and addictions, things like that. So this was an idea to get people back downtown and feel safe again. So there was security around the area. We did feel very safe walking after dark. There were some folks that maybe were a little questionable, but everyone kind of kept to themselves. And this was really fun. They had a sport court floor put on this stage area. You're able to rent roller skates, and the wheels light up when you go. So I had an absolute ball. I had a DJ there playing music. He was taking requests and that sort of thing. There were young children all the way up to seniors taking part. Some people brought their own skates, which was great to see. If I lived closer, I probably would have brought my own skates, but that's okay. So it was a lot of fun, and I was all the fatigue from the day kind of vanished away once I got going on my skates. And Chris skated too, did very well.
until 5 minutes later when we were trying to find her bus, and she was extremely tired for some odd, strange, unexplainable reason. So we have a couple of restaurants in San Francisco that we go to all the time, and this is one of them because I love po' boys. Fried little oysters on a lovely French baguette with some simple lettuce and tomato and a cream sauce on top. It's one of my favorite sandwiches of all time. And this, so far, is my favorite restaurant to have po' boys at. So, and they're bloody cheap. It's like $8. And you get more than enough for 2 people, but she wanted the shrimp one and I don't like shrimp, so I had the oyster one.
So we're going down the Embarcadero, which is part of this extension of Fisherman's Wharf area neighborhood, North Beach. So this will be around the north and the east side of the main part of San Francisco, around the bay. And that we're, go back for 1 second there. These are a couple of the different vintage streetcars on the F line. So they've restored these. They've been collecting them from all over the world for a number of years, and they're fully functional. And if you buy a tourist pass for their muting system, which is the municipal transit system, it gets you passage on the cable cars, the streetcars, the buses, the subway, the BART system. So it's quite affordable that way, and I recommend this because it's a lot of fun to watch the different colored streetcars coming towards you.
I was just checking my pocket because the other day I found my muni pass from this trip. I think I took it out already.
And we came down to the ferry terminal building. So this is a big iconic feature in the downtown area there. It is quite old. It was built, where am I here? 1898, and survived both the 1906 and 1989 earthquakes. It did shift a little bit on its foundation, so it is slightly askew, but it is structurally sound. And they have converted the inside to shops and restaurants, groceries. It is an active ferry terminal, so a lot of folks will come and go there throughout the day. So they have lots of convenience foods and items. There's a really neat little used bookstore there. So if you're looking for something to take with you on your ferry ride, you can pick one of those up. And
you can drop off your old book and get a discount on your new book. So it's quite a popular place to be for a lot of the folks waiting for the ferries. They're grabbing a new book every other day, bringing back their old one.
I'll also add, on the outside part where you see those birds roosting, they did a smaller version of San Francisco there at a different time of the year. So it's a mobile phenomenon. Another moody day. Behind that building there, you can see that's the Bay Bridge, so not the Golden Gate. This goes over to Oakland. And then into the financial district. So another lovely streetcar there. This is kind of the main hub for all the business happening, banking and so forth, finance. It's quite historic. But the reason we went there, we've been there on our last trip, was we wanted to check out the Salesforce Park. And this is something, let me go back 1 slide, I think. So in the tall picture on the right, in the lower corner, you can kind of see a lighter gray stripe going across there. On top of it, you see some greenery, and that's where the park is. It's actually up above the street over their transit center. So it's pretty cool. And if you're not familiar with Salesforce, they are a multi-billion-dollar company. They do, what's the
CRM system?
Yeah, so customer relations, finance and things like that, donations.
Yeah, so you'll see many different businesses and corporations using a CRM system to keep track of their clients. It's not even just financial sector. When I worked for the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation of Work, nonprofits will use it to keep personal information safe. And so it is a huge company that works with probably some of the biggest businesses in the world. And so their facility is 3 buildings in downtown San Francisco. And because they had so many people coming to the downtown core, they decided to create their own transit system to tie into the San Francisco transit system. Because so many people were coming to that area who didn't live in San Francisco, some were driving up to 3 hours to get into downtown San Francisco. Some would hire buses just to pick up all of the employees from one community. And it was getting to be a logistical nightmare to get these folks down to San Francisco's core. So what Salesforce did is they created a terminal right in between their 3 buildings. And on top of it is this park. And so you can see the buses coming in, you can see the trains coming in. And one of the features on the right-hand side here, I can't find, oh, pardon me, picture in the very, very center with the glass, there's a fountain along that edge of the park. And when a bus comes in, to lead with the start of the bus, the water starts going up as a bus comes in to indicate a bus has just arrived. And so it's about 5 or 10 minutes, they load up and go. So if you're up in the park, you can see when the buses come in by watching the water, and then you don't see the bus. It's just incredible. And there's different zones in the park
There
area.
are 13 different features, botanical areas around the world. And it sits about 70 feet above the main streets. And it's a 4 city block stretch. It's home to 600 trees and 16,000 plants. That's huge. Salesforce One, which I don't have a really great picture because it's so big and it wouldn't fit on the slides properly, is now the tallest building in San Francisco. It used to be the Trans-American Pyramid, but it was surpassed a number. That one on the left, the tall picture on the left, so the conical shaped building, that's Salesforce One.
It doesn't get a lot of promotion, but I would highly recommend going and checking it out.
It was fun.
It's free. You just go up through the terminal building and go up onto the roof. They do classes up there during the day. They do meditation sessions up there. They do yoga up there. They do concerts. You can have weddings up there. It really has been a community hub for downtown San Francisco. And you're highly encouraged, if you work in the buildings around there, to go and take part in some of the daytime activities as a stress reliever.
So it's a Steinway piano store, very high end there. Some other neat architecture, some modern things, some very vintage things that survived the earthquake.
And so these photos that we're showing you now are going to be a little misleading for downtown San Francisco. Since Christmas, downtown San Francisco has changed quite a bit. They have a very troubling homeless situation right now. The homeless have basically taken over many of these retail spaces and are owning the vestibules. And the crime rate down in San Francisco right now is so large that you'll notice Old Navy was in that photo. They're not there anymore. Neiman Marcus has closed out some of their stuff, not the main one, but some of their other stuff around the downtown area. Some of the big flagship stores that were launched in San Francisco and started down here are leaving because they can't keep their customers safe, or because theft has gotten to the point where they're losing more money than they're making. And so they've started to move out. So many of these photos that you're seeing now, these buildings are now boarded up. And that's only happened in the last 6 months.
On the left is Maiden Lane, so it's part of the former red light district. The brothels were mainly destroyed in the 1906 earthquake. So after things were rebuilt, they renamed it Maiden Lane, more of a European flair, and it no longer has problems. We're into Chinatown here. We went through the Dragon Gate, and this is I'd say the tourist side of Chinatown. This is on, I can't remember this Grant.
Yep.
Grant is the tourism side. Erie is the more authentic Chinatown. So we took a quick little dab in here. We didn't spend a ton of time because we spent a whole day there on our previous trip, but still lovely to go in and check things out. Peek in the stores, check out the murals. And then destination for that day was Grace Cathedral, and this is an Episcopal church and the third largest in the United States. It's been in many movies and television shows. It's quite famous. It's been a church up there for quite a number of years, but the current version of it was consecrated in 1964. So just a really neat place to go and walk around. This is the AIDS Memorial Chapel. So San Francisco was very largely impacted by the AIDS crisis in the late 70s and the early 1980s. So there's a specific chapel dedicated to that. The altarpiece on the left was done by artist Keith Haring. It's an original piece there. Just a nice little spot to have some quiet reflection. This is another location we're going to spend more time in it than you probably counted for, which seems to be a trend with us when we travel. But, ooh, look, shiny thing. The stained glass in this cathedral is next level. There are modern pieces of stained glass, and I challenge you, if you go there, to find the astronaut. They have modern stained glass in there depicting modern ideas and stories. And on the sides, I don't know if you can see it very well in these photos, but on the bottoms, oh, there's another picture coming up. These are some pictures that Ansel Adams took before he became a famous photographer. So these are original signed by him, some work he had done in the cathedral itself. a number of small chapels off the sides. There's one.
So there's murals on the bottom side depicting the Great Fire of San Francisco and to the heroes and some of the stories that came out of that fire. So it's really interesting. They have a virtual tour that goes with this as well. So you're not just left to your own. You go around with your phone and you can scan the different QR codes and get the different stories that are around there. But there's also tablets that are there so that you can follow along if you aren't tech savvy. It's well worth the tour. You had to pay to go in, but it wasn't very much at all. It was worth it. It was worth it.
The tours. We did the art and glass as well as the architectural tour. So the rose window is modeled after the one in the Shaw shop. The church overall has over 68 main windows by 5 specific artists that were used over the years. And if you did the square footage, there's 7,200 square feet of stained glass. The picture in the top right is made of scraps from windows that were being repaired or replaced, so they kind of did a mosaic.
And the lovely golden doors out front.
So Grace Cathedral sits on top of what's called Knob Hill, and Knob in this context is short for snobs. It was a very wealthy area. Many of the famous businessmen in the early days lived and worked up here. This is the Mark, top of the Mark Hotel. Very expensive. You can see the sloping street that goes down. This photo does not do it justice. There's an intersection in the corner of this hotel as well as the Fairmont, and the streets all come up to this one block. It's flat, and then you go back down in all directions. So it's a little unsettling if you're driving. Very hard to walk.
This is another one of our favorite places to stop and have a bite to eat. As you can imagine, we just love to travel around as much as we can by foot to find these different locations. But we get some phenomenal photos all over the place. And this is American Zoetrope building. Francis Ford Coppola owns this building. And the rumor is that he still has a studio in it to work on some of his films. So this is a place that we enjoy stopping because they have a lovely happy hour. And the food is just delicious, and you can sit there and people watch all you want. But it was raining this day, and we had missed the happy hour, so we decided to move on.
You can see a little bit of the Trans-America Pyramid just to the side of the American Zoetrope building there. So it was quite quick. Not see the top that day. Just some other buildings in the neighborhood.
Big Al's is a bar that's in the area. Well, I'm trying to be PC. It's a bar with people on display. So being that we missed happy hour, we went to look for a new location to go and check out for some food, and we found this lovely little pizza joint that was just started by an entrepreneur, and it was his mother who was acting as the maitre d' for the day. And so we learned an awful lot about the chef and the owner, as his mother was very, very, very proud of him. And we decided to have a goat cheese, pear, and walnut pizza for supper that night. It was very nice, very nice. Probably something that I wouldn't have ordered unless somebody had pushed us to try it, and it was very, very good. So more of our wandering, just finding different little pieces for nice photos and checking things out. And then we went to Cobb's Comedy Club. And this location, of course, famous for helping Robin Williams' career in San Francisco. He performed there quite frequently. And so we decided to go take in a show. And I will warn you about comedy clubs. If you haven't been to them in the United States, the tickets are cheap, but the drinks are expensive. Each one of the drinks was about $30, 20 to 30 bucks. However, you got in for like 10.
Yeah, it was very expensive.
So,
To drink minimum.
yeah, it was a fantastic night though.
This is an alley that was near her place. Pretty greenery.
And it seems in San Francisco, those neighborhoods, they really get a lot of pride from the neighbors, at least from a good core group. That alley that we just showed you, you'll see the light strands above, they had it all decorated. So over the street, it was decorated for Christmas. So there's a lot of pride in San Francisco in very small pockets, and it's fun to find the different ideas.
Did a quick walk around, went through the Deer Deli area, got some souvenirs for folks back home. hopped on the bus because we wanted to go back to Old Gate Park. We had plans to go to the California Academy of Arts and Science. Did not realize we should have booked those ones, and they were sold out for the day. So plan B, we did some walking around. They've got some awesome botanical areas. It's, as you said, an enormous park and a lot of different things from different ecosystems. And then we ended up here, Conservatory of Flowers. This is an elaborate Victorian building that was finished in 1879. And it is quite the highlight of the trip. I have allergies, and even though I was sneezing and dripping, I had a great time there.
This place is huge. It has a central area and then two wings. A central atrium with a lot of the plants mixed together, somewhat how you would find them in nature. And then there's two wings with different specific pieces.
So center part, there's potted plants, lowland plants, highland plants, and aquatic plants. So you can probably skip through these fairly quickly.
And that's chocolate in the middle. The folks that were there was a group of 5 or 6, and they were just losing their minds that was chocolate. So it was rather interesting. We like the people watch while we're out there too. So that was a highlight for me. But there's a banana tree in the middle with some bananas up top, and they had said that they do harvest them from time to time. So this was a lovely little find for us. And this fish here, I don't know, I leaned over to take a photo, and it came over to me and was like, obviously not talking, but talking to me. It came out of the water, and it was just, I don't know what it was, but just enthralled to come over and visit. So that was fun. Made me feel special.
Big things, little things, all kinds of different details to look at. Many picture plants. I believe, what is that really stinky one called? They have one. It only blooms once.
Oh, the death plant.
The death plant.
It smells like
cornflower.
cornflower. It smells like rotting bodies.
They have one, but it wasn't blooming when we were there.
Yeah. I think it's blooming right now, if I'm not
It just
mistaken.
finished it.
Just finished blooming.
The water lilies, mosses, trees and berries, many orchids of varieties I've never seen before, and likely never will again.
I had overheard a lot of folks talking. They've got passes to this, and they come every other week because there's so much to see. So they'll come and they'll spend their time in one section, then come back the next week and move on and move on. It was hard to focus. This was a lovely backup to not being able to go into the other museum. We had just stumbled upon this one, and it turned out to be just as lovely.
And smaller fish price, it wasn't extravagant at all.
And then outside, despite the weather, the plants were still in bloom and still full of color. So we got to go around the garden that was there a little bit. They have some xeriscape gardens. They've got some tropical gardens there. The park itself is almost a museum into itself. So you could probably spend an entire week just in the park.
So on our way out of the park over to Haight-Ashbury, you'll notice a little train at the top. This is all lit up, and it's under a Christmas tree, which we'll get to in a moment or two. The gentleman in the picture inside of that train, his name is David Miles Jr., and he's the idea man behind that San Francisco roller skate. He has an organization called the Church of Eight Wheels. They've gone into an old church and they've made it into a roller rink. Didn't get there that trip, but it's on my future list. Great philanthropist for the area.
So we pop over to Haight-Ashbury. We had explored it quite extensively on our last trip. We spent an entire afternoon there, but we were hungry. We were looking for something to eat, and I had heard of a pizza place in this area that was quite good. And there's a bar in this area. It's a dive bar. It is the dive bar of dive bars, but it's one of our favorite places to go because they serve one of our favorite beers, Pliny the Elder, and you can only get it in California. So we found this place by accident on our first trip, and now we go every time because it's the only place that we can find this beer. So this is Amoeba Music is actually fairly famous for being one of the places in San Francisco you went to find records for artists who weren't being produced large scale yet. And as you can imagine, in Haight-Ashbury in the 70s in San Francisco, there was a lot of underground music in 60s, 70s that wasn't mainstream yet. You think of like who were some of the Grateful Dead, Jan Arden, no, not Jan, Janis Joplin, pardon me. So there were a lot of these artists that were there, and they needed a place, and Anita Music was their place, and it's still going today. I did not go in there because I wouldn't have had a place for the records to come home. So I just decided I'm not going in. But then we found the pizza joint that I was talking about, and it's Escape from New York Pizza. And this apparently is an institution in San Francisco that I hadn't learned of before, but they go a little wild with their pizza flavors, and they still have some very contemporary pizza flavors. But the third one there was spinach, basil, artichoke, and sun-dried tomato. A fantastic combination. I was shocked, but they were $4 a slice, and you only really needed one.
This was too much pizza. 4 pieces was too much.
Too much, but just delicious pizza. Probably to date, my favorite pizza that I found, but New York's going to give them a run for their money in a week. I can't wait to try the pizza out there. I love pizza. If I could only eat one food for the rest of my life, it would be pizza. You know, for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and never had the same thing twice.
This is coming down to this bar. This is John Marios. It's been there since the 30s. He was a pro tennis player. He actually won the 1933 Canadian Open. Strange little fact there. But he had a sports shop at this location before, and they have that beer that Chris was mentioning. So hasn't changed much since then.
Yeah, very much a dive bar. So when you walk in, just be aware that it's a dive bar. Great people there. The bartenders and all of the patrons were phenomenal people. It's a dive bar.
So there's the Christmas tree that was by that train. It's on the corner of the park. We did hop on a bus because we had a different place to be that night. Went over to the Presidio Theater. This is in that military area near Golden Gate Bridge. It's been restored. It was built in the 1930s and it's sat empty for a long time, but over its life it had a movie theater for members of the U.S. Army and their families. And it's now recognized as a historic site. We went to see a pantomime. It's a big view.
So a pantomime encourages audience participation quite a bit. You're supposed to yell at the villains. You're supposed to cheer on and give encouragement to the lead characters. And it's supposed to be for kids. So if you participate, they throw chocolates. But I'm a permanent child and probably will never be qualified as an adult. And so we got chocolates from Ghirardelli. They had the high-end chocolates. They weren't giving out junk. These were like probably $1 or $2 a piece for these little pieces of chocolate, but it was so much fun. And then they had their own merchandise, so merchandising.
This was our last full day. We went back down to sort of Union Square area, went through another one of their white collar malls, so some high-end stores there. They had a big countdown for 2023. And then this is a sculpture that we're standing on either side of their dogs taking pictures with the camera. So
this is one of the malls that has been closed because of the violence and stealing in the downtown area right now. But as well, this was a mall. If you worked downtown and you needed something before you went home, this was the mall that you went to. But because so many workers in San Francisco still aren't back to the office, they're working from home, this mall has lost a significant amount of revenue just from that. And then you add in the homelessness and violence problem they're suffering in the downtown area right now. This mall has since closed. In like the last month, it just closed. So, which is a shame because it was a very, very lovely mall.
So we needed a bite to eat, so we went to Mel's Diner, very 50s style. There's a few of them in San Francisco. This one was convenient for us, and the food was fast and reasonably priced.
We had a reason to be in the area. We got to go to a musical. I love musicals. I am a Broadway person. I used to be a stage manager. So musicals are a big part of my life. And so when we got down there, we did some searching and we found out that Beetlejuice the musical was playing in the theater district. And we couldn't afford tickets. They were too expensive. It was a hot seat. But I found a website that said if you show up at 10 o'clock in the morning when the theater opens, they put tickets on sale for 2 hours every morning. And so we hopped on the early bus, went down there, and we ended up getting decent seats for $20 a piece instead of what would have been nearly $120. So we got to see the show for $40.
This is the Golden Gate Theater. There's a number of historic theaters in this area. This is a lovely decorated roof inside.
And as a theater guy, of course, I walked around and was just in absolute awe by their lighting system. The Beetlejuice sign that you see over the stage right now is a full-size neon sign that they flew in and then flew back out for when the show started. So it was an incredibly elaborate off-Broadway production. It was a Broadway tour production. So,
and if you're familiar with the movie, it's similar but different. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Same time, so back outside, this was the only day we had consistent rain, start to finish.
so this is New Year's Eve.
Yeah. We needed those umbrellas, but by supper time had passed, they had kind of dwindled to showers, and then eventually the rain stopped. Hopped on a boat, and this was my Christmas present to Chris. And we did a tour of the bay at night, so we could see the different lights and go under the bridges. So it was really cool. Went under the Golden Gate and saw it from the other side. And we came back and circled around the back side of Alcatraz Island. We'd been to Alcatraz on our previous trip, so it was very dark on the back side. This is the side that faces Sausalito and Angel Island, and then you come around the main landing area there with the lights. And then we headed to the east and went under the Bay Bridge. And at that time there was a light installation. I think they had shut it down for a while, but they're funding to get it started again, so the bridge is all lit up.
And then we went to what might be my favorite place in San Francisco. This is the Mechanical Museum that's on the wharf. And they collect old video games from when they weren't video games. So these would have been old mechanical pinball machines. They would have been old mechanical music players. Nickelodeons. They had, how many of the different coin-operated organs that were there? Just an incredible collection. And you are encouraged to play with them. It's not just a museum, you are encouraged to play with them. So I found a few different games that I've enjoyed over the years. Addams Family Pinball is one of Karla's favorites, but Sunset Riders is a video game that my brother and I used to play on Nintendo when it first came out. And so every time I go down there, I try and get the top score because it's one of my favorite games. So it's one of my favorite places down in San Francisco. And then the end of our day, we needed a bite to eat, so we popped into Boudin Sourdough to have some of their clam chowder and their fantastic sourdough sandwiches. And then Anchor Steam beer, which is something that is unfortunately on the endangered species list. It's about to be shut down unless the staff are trying to buy it right now. And it is currently owned by Sapporo, a Japanese beer company, and they're looking at shutting it down. But the employees are trying to keep it open. So now it's time for New Year's. We've went back and we had a little nap because we were up early that morning, and it was like 10 o'clock at night and the fireworks weren't set to go off, of course, until midnight. So we went and had a little nap and then found our spot to sit and watch down on the wharf, and the fireworks were over the Bay Bridge. And it was, if you haven't seen an American fireworks display, I would highly recommend it. It is on a totally different level than ours.
Last morning, before we headed out, last view from our balcony, we took the bus back out to a major transit spot, went through the actual Chinatown, and then we hopped on the BART, which is the Bay Area Rapid Transit System, and took the subway all the way back out to the airport.
And one thing San Francisco is getting more and more known for are their garlic parsley fries. They take fresh cut French fries, they fry them to a super crisp, and then they toss them in copious amounts of garlic and parsley. So much garlic. I'm a garlic lover, and it was just on the edge of being too much. But there were just giant hunks of garlic on these fries. I'm pretty sure the entire plane could tell that we had garlic fries before we hopped on.
That's it.
So that's it. So just a little plug once again for us. We are Wandering Whimsy on social media, and so we would encourage you to follow along on our trips. We always do updates as we go. We try and tell stories, and we try and find some of those places that you might walk by, as you probably noticed. We like to find those little holes in the community where the tourists keep on walking, and we always stop. So that's how we travel. We encourage you to slow down a little bit, even in your own community. You might find something pretty cool here in Moose Jaw you've never seen. So thanks so much for coming out.